It's time to rank the albums of Parkway Drive, and I'm letting the hardcore fans out there know right now, you're gonna hate it. And of course, as always, these are just my opinions. There is no such thing as an objective ranking. If you think yours is the correct one...
Problem with you is, you're completely delusional.
That said, let's start with Don't Close Your Eyes in 2004. Now, I don't normally include EPs, but since this is a pretty short discography and people bring it up in the comments, I figured why not. Note that I'm only judging this one on the original 8 tracks it came with and not the additional re-release bonus tracks. I really don't have that much to say about this one. It's very much demo quality and pretty par for the course for formative material from the genre, in a similar vein to like Bleeding Through's Dust to Ashes or As I Lay Dying's Beneath the Encasing of Ashes. Lots of ashes. I might have liked this back in high school, and by the way, just for context, I've been a huge metalcore head going way back to like 2001, but I gotta say, this one's pretty rough. I'm putting it at D tier. Don't get mad yet, because trust me, I have far hotter takes to come. In any case, we have Killing with a Smile in 2005, the actual full-length debut. Now, a point I mention a lot with these guys when I criticize them is that while they're bringing a lot of the same ideas as their peers, they came pretty late to the game. By 2005, we'd already had a lot of other seminal albums in this style and done way better, in my opinion, in the likes of Poison the Well's The Opposite of December in 1999, Killswitch Engage's Alive or Just Breathing in 2002, and As I Lay Dying's Frail Words Collapse in 2003. A year before, we got Unearth's The Oncoming Storm in 2004, just to, again, name a handful to bring some more context to this. So, for a new listener, I could get why this might be an awesome listen. To me, this was just very much like a lesser retread of the same ideas. And especially they got to jump right in directly with the support of Epitaph Records and production from Killswitch's Adam D. I'm pretty unimpressed. I see plenty of fan praise for this, but I also see that reviews were pretty lukewarm even back then, with AllMusic saying, "It just depends on where your personal opinions currently stand on the necessity of another metalcore act," and Punk News putting it even more harshly by calling it a mindless affair that is unable to avoid any of metalcore's pitfalls. And going on to say that they could have created a picture of metalcore as they see it, but instead they were content to trace the works of those who came before. And honestly, I think that pretty much sums up my feelings overall. In a word, it's just kind of basic.
You're a basic bitch.
Not bad, but nothing special either. The definition of a C-tier album, if you ask me. If you love it, good for you. Feel free to start dumping your histrionic rage in the comments now. You're only helping the video by doing so, and just expect this reaction from me.
Oh no! Anyway, last week...
Moving right along, we have Horizons in 2007. So once again, through Epitaph and with support from Adam D. And again, met with mixed reception, but plenty of commercial success, charting at number 6 on the ARIA album charts. More or less a continuation of the same ideas from the last one, and please note, I did go back and re-listen to all of these again to prepare for this one, and honestly, I was even less enthused about them than I remember. Tons of recycled generic chugs on the likes of Feed Them to the Pigs, Boneyards bring some decent energy, but no real hooks to back it up, and even slightly catchier tracks like Idols and Archers just feel like B-sides from Shadows Are Security. Carry On is alright for a more melodic track and actually has some more memorable riffing. It's like fast food, you know, sometimes you just want some salty fries and a shitty drive-thru burger, but it's not something you're going to rave about to all of your friends. Very little of substance, nothing to really chew on here, and by now in a time where most bands had been evolving their sound in more interesting directions, as with Poison the Well's Versions that came out the same year, I feel pretty similar about this one as the last one, and once more agree with AllMusic for describing it as strictly by the book metalcore. Totally sums it up, also putting this one at C tier.
How dare you!
That brings us to Deep Blue in 2010. So this is their most critically acclaimed release, in addition to hitting number 2 on ARIA and number 39 on Billboard. It also won the ARIA Award for Best Hard Rock or Heavy Metal Album and is certified gold. And I agree that it's at least somewhat of a step up in terms of songwriting. If I were to pick one track I enjoy the most from these guys, it might be Sleepwalker. It's no major revelation, but it gets my foot tapping and my head bobbing. Kind of a neat music video too. Tracks are also a bit more moody and atmospheric, like Wreckage and Alone. The hooks are a bit stronger, and it's also more like emotionally engaging. That said, I still don't love it. Call me crazy, but I just think that this is still pretty basic, especially for 2010, and I'd much rather be listening to August Burns Red, but I will put this one at B tier.
Move this man!
That brings us to Atlas in 2012. So this album continues down that more emotionally resonant path right from the start with the very dramatic intro of Sparks pulling on a lot of melodic death metal influences in the guitars. Wild Eyes is certainly a standout here with the crowd-pleasing whoa-ohs and that infectious main hook. Dark Days is another go-to with that big build-up. The Slow Surrender has that undeniable groove, and I appreciate the blissful, floaty nature of the beginning of The River. But then instead of fully embracing that direction, there's still kind of an identity crisis here with tracks like Old Ghost, New Regrets launching us into yet another very generic direction that would have already felt dated back in 2005. And once more, others like Dream Run and Sleight of Hand feel like Shadows Are Security outtakes despite having moved into a completely new decade. Overall, though, and let me know in the comments if this is a hot take, I do think that it's a better album than Deep Blue. It's more dynamic with more varied songwriting and better atmosphere, especially with the strings on the title track. It's still far from even my top 50 metalcore albums of all time, but within their own discography, I feel good about giving it an A. So moving on to Ire in 2015. So this is an interesting one in that on the one hand, I respect that they decided to move a little away from the formula here. Songs are a bit more varied, which is evident right from the top with the kind of rock and roll stomp of Destroyer, and admittedly the gang vocals and the guitar leads are kind of fun. Winston's also making an extra effort to bring a little bit more variety to his vocals on tracks like Dying to Believe, which is more of a headbanger. Vice Grip is a little corny, but also kind of infectious. I'm sure there has been many a show with the crowd screaming along to this one. Bottom Feeder has a little bit of that Hatebreed hardcore flavor to it. Crushed, despite being kind of cringe in the vocal department, is also pretty damn engaging in that turn your brain off and get pissed off, break stuff kind of way. On the other hand, it does go a little bit too far at times, especially with Writings on the Wall kind of jumping the shark with the melodrama, giving Rob Flynn and Corey Taylor a run for their money. I know this one doesn't have the classic status of the others, but if it's been a while, give it a fresh listen if you haven't, because I was kind of surprised with my reaction. Ultimately, I think it's a more dynamic album, again, kind of evolving a bit more interesting songwriting as a result. So again, if this is a hot take, let me know, but in the larger scope of the genre, I'd say this is more of a B, but within their own discography, I'd say it's closer to an A for them.
Let the hate flow through you.
That brings us to Reverence in 2018. Wishing Wells is a super corny way to kick this one off in kind of a new metal style. Think Slipknot for this one. The heavy parts are actually pretty banging if it weren't for the dumber vocal choices, and prepare for that to be a trend on this album.
So ask me how I'm coping, and I'll smile and tell you I'm just fine. Well, down inside I'm drowning in the fucking rain.
Likewise, the guitar work on Pray has an almost Rotting Christ quality to it, so great dueling heavy metal guitar harmonies, but Winston kind of ruins it again with some of the cheesiest yarls I've ever heard. There's more great atmosphere, like the strings on Cemetery Bloom that somehow perfectly set up the 80s metal attitude of the Void's main hook, which only further make the vocals on this one sound like garbage by comparison. And unfortunately, so goes with pretty much the entire album. Great performances from the rest of the band, and just decisions I can't stand on the vocals. Reaching peak cringe with the clean singing and embarrassing rapping on Shadowboxing and the spoken word of The Color of Leaving. I mentioned Rob Flynn earlier, and this really does feel like some of the goofier stuff he's done with Machine Head. Kind of sad really, because Fix the Vocals in this honestly could have been an S tier album for them, but they really drag it down quite a bit. So everything else, though, still good enough in my book to actually put this one at a B. Hot takes continue, and yes, I still think it's at least more interesting than the older stuff, which is why it makes this rank. And that brings us to Darker Still in 2022. Now, I already made my thoughts known regarding the single glitch in my reaction video.
Feel a glitch in the cortex, like a ghost in the shadow.
Okay, already. I'm kind of like, ugh.
How fucking lame.
This is easily one of the worst songs I've heard this year, and I think the worst song that they've ever written. I don't even hate rap and metal as a rule, but the execution here is just awful, and holy crap, those lyrics. God, see these lyrics. It's goofy enough that I even saw a lot of the more hardcore fans wondering what they were smoking when they put this one together. Fortunately though, this is not representative of the album as a whole. On the positive side, Ground Zero opens very much like something off of the last album, with the more dramatic bells and clean singing setting a solemn tone before we explode into the first big soaring guitar hook. From an instrumental point, this one is pretty solid and the vocals aren't all that bad. I even like the little sing-along portions where the guitar drops out and just leaves the pounding of the drums. Like Napalm is a head-bobbing chugger with some fun little wah-wah effect. I think the main lead is a little too similar to the last song, but this one is decent as well. Winston sticking to mostly sort of a high yarl that works well enough and at least avoids getting on my nerves. Likewise, Imperial Heretic is a foot tapper. Winston has some mildly corny vocal moments here, but it's nothing as bad as before. But my favorite here may be The Greatest Fear, which opens with organ and chorals going into another pretty epic sounding guitar line. It's like a damn war march. Great example here of a shut me up and prove me wrong track. Like, I have nothing snarky to say about this one. Darker Still starts off as an acoustic ballad, and if I were honestly just looking to trash this band for the sake of doing so, which is what I get accused of in the comments, this might be another easy target, but to be honest, I like this one too. Winston sounds very somber and genuine. It's not cheesy, and I enjoy the little flavor touches of the whistling hook and strings. Not to mention it really builds up into more big guitars and killer soloing alongside the symphonic elements. But back on the negative side, If a God Can Bleed is peak cringe, with the sort of whisper rapping of, if a god can bleed, he can bleed you out. Super dorky lyrics. I feel like Winston's going for kind of a Mike Patton thing here with the deeper vocals, which, while admirable, just doesn't quite pan out. The piano hook is pretty cool though, and I hear the potential for an interesting song, but it just doesn't quite come all together for me. Soul Breach is one of the heavier tracks, going for kind of a Slipknot stomper again. More rapping here that just is not it, in my opinion, but it's not nearly as bad as on Glitch. Overall, it's kind of okay, except for that spoken word portion before the breakdown. And these unfortunately carry over into Land of the Lost, which again is fine, but not exactly great either. Kind of a catchy chorus at least. And then From the Heart of Darkness starts off promising with the big pounding drums and grunts, almost like something out of like Skyrim, but then we get some pretty Glitch level vocals on this one too, so it's an unfortunate way to end the album. All said and done, I'll admit that this album is actually quite a bit better than I expected, but it still has a long way to go. Pretty strong instrumentals, lots of great additional improvements, and even some subtle improvements with the vocals too, but the low points really just drag it down again. But averaging this thing out again, I mean, again, at least it's interesting. It's a little bit more unique. It had me intrigued, unlike some of their earlier material. So this one is also going at like a low B tier. If I was just giving it a grade as an album, it would probably be like a C+ or something like that. Check out this playlist for plenty more metalcore videos and rankings, and let me know your own rankings in the comments. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.